recording. Welcome to my blog.stampwithelaine.com and welcome to the Jar of Love series. The Jar of Love and Everyday Framelits can currently be purchased as a bundle to save you 10%. You can find it on page 75 of the annual catalogue. The stamp set itself comprises of 37 stamps, including sentiments, leaves, flowers, the jars itself, and even burlap ribbon here, the screw top for the jars, bows, and the water reservoir for inside the jar. These are the everyday jar framelits, and you have the large, medium and small jar, the screw top lid. This is the handle for the jar. I'll be showcasing that in another video. Perhaps you want to cut a piece of cardstock to insert inside the jar for the water. Then there is a die for cutting out the leaves, the stems, the flowers. Now this is a die that, although it is one, it actually cuts two flowers separately. You have the goldfish here, a bow, and the firefly, and a die that cuts out individual hearts. This is the card we're making today, and for this you need the Jar of Love stamp set and the Everyday Jar framelit die. The card base is in Calypso Coral, cut at 4 1/8 by 11 3/4 inches. That's 10.5 centimeters by 30 centimeters. And then with the long side on top, you score at 5 7/8 or 15 centimeters. Grey layer. This has been cut at 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/2. That's 9.5 centimeters by 14 centimeters. The Whisper White layer is standard Whisper White cardstock, and that's been cut at 3 5/8 by 5 3/8 inches. That's 9.2 by 13.7 centimeters. We need Calypso Coral ink, Wild Wasabi, Soft Sky, Crumb Cake, Basic Grey archival ink as well, an aqua painter. You also need clear blocks A, B, C, D and H, the Big Shot and magnetic platform, some scraps of Whisper White cardstock. First, let's do our stamping. So we need our foam pad, some scratch paper. We're doing some masking, so I need a post-it note and my archival ink, and I'm going to stamp the jar on the sticky bit down here. Then I'm going to just cut that along the line. I've finished cutting that mask off camera and I'll set it aside. I'm going to ink it up in the archival grey ink. If I put this post-it note over the stamped image, then ink up the second Mason's jar and stamp over the post-it note, then when I remove the post-it note, it will appear as though that jar is at the back. I've done a series of these and I just store it in my stamp box so that I can use it again when I need it, and then I won't have to cut one out every time. This stamp here stamps the water effect inside the jar, so I'll need Soft Sky for that, and I want it lighter, so I'll need to stamp off first before stamping on my jar. To get the water in the larger Mason's jar, I'll need to put my mask on again, ink up my stamp, stamp off and then stamp on. Isn't that neat? When you come to stamping the stem of the flower, there is a thick end and a thin end, so make sure you're using the right end to stamp with. Now I want to stamp this leaf here, so I place it on my card front. Make sure that I've got it at the right angle. A different leaf to go in the opposite direction. Also want to stamp a stem for the flower that lies on the table, so I shall stamp one here. Now I want to stamp my flowers, and that's done in Calypso Coral. All the stamps have this arrow pointing upwards, an extra piece of rubber. So here's a little trick. This one, the larger one, is the one that you have to stamp in a lighter shade. So what I do is, on the reverse side of the block, I put the smaller stamp pointing in the same direction as the one underneath. So let's stamp the lighter shade first, using Calypso Coral again. Stamp off, stamp on, and then flip it over, and this time just stamp directly from ink pad to cardstock. And I'm going to need 2 of those. And you want to leave enough room between each flower to cut them out. Silly me, I forgot to press the record button, so you can see I've stamped one on the main card front layer. Same applies to these stamps as well. So you can see the extra pointy bit here and the extra pointy bit there. So I've married it up, one on the front and on the reverse the highlighting colour. So let's stamp that. Stamp off, stamp on, stamp directly. I want a couple of little flowers, so I'll stamp off again, stamp on, then the reverse, and stamp directly on without stamping. I also want to stamp this little Hessian detail on the jar. I'll need crumb cake for that, and don't forget to stamp off first and then stamp on. There's this little bow here, so stamp in crumb cake again and stamp. Cut that off and leave a little border. Pop that on the jar, lay that post-it note on top, so it'll give you a guideline as to where to cut your contour of the Hessian. So a bit of Tombow on the back of that, and adhere it to the jar like so. Squeeze your lid to get some ink onto the lid, and use your aqua painter and just give it a little colour wash. Don't want it too wet, so that your jars have got something to stand on. Bring in your magnetic platform, base cutting plate, cardstock with your stamped images, and place the dies over the images that you want to cut. Now this die, although it is the one die, it will cut both the floral images out into 2 separate flowers. Then your top cutting plate, and you're ready to run it through the Big Shot. So I'll go and do that off camera. Bring my silicone mat in, glue on the back of that, or Tombow rather. Dimensionals on the back of the flowers. Lastly, stamp the greeting hello in this corner here. Glue on the back, attach it to the basic grey layer, leaving an even border all round, and then attach that layer to the card base. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe or share on Facebook, and my grateful thanks if you do. If you're watching from YouTube, you'll find the list of supplies I used below this video in the Show More section, with direct links to my online store. They will also be listed on my blog.stampwithelaine.com. You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest or Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.